with it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of TV Rearview with Matt Squirrel. That's me. I did on a previous video a little bit of an overview of Amazing Stories Season 1. I didn't give any spoilers, I just kind of broke everything down. So if you want to know a little bit of history about the series, I would highly suggest checking that video out. But for today, we're going to do episode 1 of Season 1, which is one of my favorites. It was the beginning of the series that ran on NBC from 1985 to 1987. And this television show was created by Steven Spielberg, Joshua Brand, and John Falsey. Now, today specifically, we're going to be going over this first episode, which I really love, and that's Ghost Train. And there was a lot of interesting little facts about this. Now, this episode first aired on NBC on the 29th of September of 1985. Ghost Train would go on to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Costuming for a Series. Now, many of the other episodes in the first season did get nominations if they didn't get wins, and that's pretty awesome. And when they went on to their second season, they did have some wins in that as well, and a lot of nominations for just all types of cinematography to costuming to the actors themselves, of course. John Lithgow would actually be getting a Primetime Emmy for some of his work there. But anyway, to take a roundabout turn here, a popular cinematographer that was involved with this particular episode was Alan Davivo, which I'm totally sure I screwed up, so I apologize. But last name is spelled Daviau. Now, he was involved in this episode, but he had done work with E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which he did get an Academy Award nomination for in '83. Now, at the time this episode came out in 1985, his other work, The Color Purple, came out, as well as the cinematography work on The Empire of the Sun, which would come out in 1987. Now, he's been all over the place working in different avenues, whether that be in film or in television. So it is exciting to kind of see a name there with a history and just seeing where they came from, where they went, and the direction of such. Now, Ghost Train does star Robert Blossom, okay, as the grandfather, Opa Globe. Or his first name is Clyde Globe, but he goes by Opa, which is like his grandpa name. Mr. Blossom is a familiar character actor, and his face is recognizable for many films and television productions. And he was known not just as an actor, but he was a poet and a playwright, and he definitely deserved a lot more credit than he had been given. Now, his career does span a lot of different films. This particular, I guess, glimpse here is from Naked City, and this is a show from the 1950s that he first kind of showed up. It was one of his first acting gigs on film, let's put it that way. So, as you go on to time, you might recognize him from Escape from Alcatraz. Excuse me. Escape from Alcatraz, that was in 1979 with Clint Eastwood, and that he looked so much older than what he was. Also, he has a little bit of familiarity to people with cult classic horrors. This is a screenshot from the 1974 film Deranged, and that was a creepy movie, and this is probably the cleanest screenshot I could find. I'll leave that there because I really don't want to deal with anyone's therapy bills. But the movie is pretty cool. It is dark, that's for sure. Now, he was also, you could see him in a smaller role in Christine in 1983. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977. One of the bigger roles that most people recognize him from, and I'm repeating this screenshot as a reminder, is from Home Alone as the neighbor, Mr. Marley. So he's appeared a little bit everywhere, but if you also want a little bit of background about Robert Blossom, you can find his documentary on his life, to put it in summary, called Full Blossom, The Life of Poet and Actor Robert Blossom in 2000. I highly recommend you to check that out. He's a very interesting character, very charismatic, very quirky, but highly intelligent, and a very interesting life, which is a whole nother topic. Now, the next actor in this particular episode is Scott Paulin, and he plays the son of Opa, Fenton Globe. So another recognizable face from films such as 1985's Teen Wolf with Michael J. Fox, The Right Stuff, and one other little hint in here is that he was in Captain America in 1990 as Red Skull. Now, he has continued to work in television on numerous roles like 24, LA Law, I guess Castle is another big, more recent one. But he's in and out of a lot of different roles. So if you ever get a moment, try to catch some of his work. Now, playing the mother in this, Jolene, who's the daughter-in-law to Opa, which is Roberts Blossom's character, is going to be Gail Edwards. Now, she is the wife of Fenton, which is being played by Scott Paulin. And she's played in numerous roles on television. You might recognize her face more than her name, unfortunately, but she was also on Full House, and a lot of people might remember her on Full House. Now, Lukas Haas also has a small role as the grandson. A lot of people are more familiar with Lukas Haas. He's popped in and out, but this is a very young Lucas, so he plays the grandson. Moving on to the smaller bit character here that I wanted to point to was Sandy Ward. Now, Sandy did pass away in 2005, but he's a veteran actor known for roles in The Perfect Storm. He was as Quentin in The Timer Under Siege. 19, and that was in 1992, and then he was Calloway in Cujo and Airplane 2. Now, he's worked on numerous TV shows and small bit parts, large parts, but you might recognize him from a popular TV show of Malcolm in the Middle. And on that show, he had a smaller part, but it was a repeated part in 2000 of Logger Pete. Now, 111 films fill this man's resume, so he does have a very expansive resume. And unfortunately, he is no longer with us, but I did want to kind of touch on his history a little bit. Now, in the previous episode, as aforementioned, I mentioned that Drew Barrymore does have a very small role here. You see her little girl there. That is Drew Barrymore sitting with a lady inside the actual ghost train in this episode. So you might catch her. She's unaccredited, but she is there. And it's funny because around this time, she was coming into a lot of different films. I mean, she had already done E.T., but there was still this movement of films that she was doing, Firestarter, things like that, were still coming out. Now, another small unaccredited role that was here, which I always thought was very interesting, was Priscilla Pointer. Now, she's a familiar face, that woman there to the left, not the one holding onto the window, but the older gal to the left there. Now, Priscilla Pointer has been in many films. You might recognize her from Carrie, 1976, as Mrs. Snell, and then also as Dr. Elizabeth Sims in 1987's A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors on television. She's been recognizable, from Dallas to A-Team and more recently Cold Case. She has I think about over 90 roles, credits, 90 credits given to her name. But as a fun fact, Priscilla Pointer is the former mother-in-law of the director and executive producer Steven Spielberg. He was married to her daughter, Amy Irvine, from 1985 to 1989. So, now that we have all that down, and you have an idea of all these different colorful actors and actresses and nice little, Easter eggs you can kind of look for in the episode, let's go ahead and dip into the actual review of the show. And I'm just going to give you a synopsis. I'm not going to reveal a whole lot. Now that we have some of our main characters here, we can go forward. So the grandfather of the story is Clyde Opa Globe, who was born in 1901. When he was a young man, he was unintentionally the cause of a major train accident, okay, and which dozens of people were killed in it. And although it wasn't intentional, okay, Opa does carry that burden of his childhood mistake as though it happened just yesterday. So he even carries his own train ticket from the exact train of that day. He was supposed to be waiting on that train when the accident occurred. So with his condition deteriorating, okay, he decides, okay, well, his son decides to bring him to live with him and his family, and that includes his grandson, Brian. But much to the shock of Opa, okay, that's a bit of a shocker here, is that the land that they just built this beautiful new house on is in the same exact area of where the actual train had crashed back on that unfortunate day when he was a young boy. Now, what's a bit of a conflict here, I think, between the characters is that Opa hasn't fully come to terms with this. He's still carrying quite a bit of a burden. So with his condition deteriorating with age, his son decides, okay, you're going to come live with us, It's in the same area. It's just, I don't know. It's that moment when I kind of just have to remember that's kind of heartless, but whatever. I guess it wouldn't be a story otherwise. But the Highball Express was a very popular train in that area up until the time of the accident and well back when Opa was a 9-year-old. However, with time, the train and tracks have been unused and pretty much have just kind of fallen away to time. So when he's on the property and he's walking around his son's new home, where it happens to be the location of this train accident, he's hearing and reliving this trauma that he had went through as a young man. And the thing is that his son and his daughter-in-law seem to be completely unaware or don't care about the situation. And I did find this part really sad in many ways, that despite Opa's traumatic experience, that his son just seemed like, whatever, very dismissive. And it's as though they just brushed off his experiences as old news or aging gone awry, writing off his father due to old age in the end, really. So yet despite this, Brian, which is Opa's little grandson, played by Lukas Haas here, eagerly believes his grandfather's stories. And he supports him when the grandfather realizes the location of the house in comparison to where the actual accident occurred and realizes that the house is located directly over the former train tracks that have long been gone. So there are several different scenarios that you can go with on Opa's mental state here that I thought I should mention from first impressions. You can assume that Opa is one, getting senile with old age, not completely off his rocker by any means, but certainly not 100% aware of his erratic behavior, such as standing up in a moving vehicle through the sunroof in the first clip, from the beginning, to rambling through numerous subjects at once, kind of rattling on, swatting at invisible flies. He does display a lot of behavior that might be considered going senile or even dementia. Opa's neurologically struggling, so the line between reality and imagination have ceased to exist for some time based on what his son and daughter-in-law discussed throughout this episode. And also, 3, one of the things is he might be more keenly aware of the existence of other supernatural levels. This could be of the existence of the ghost train, or perhaps a deep foreboding that is connected to him since childhood to this accident, because it is kind of like PTSD. So he's surrounded with this particular screenshot here as a psychologist slash doctor who's coming just to kind of see his mental state. And they brush him off as kind of being crazy, as always, and as expected, because who carries around a train ticket to a train that has been gone for that long unless they're just purely guilty and maybe they're going through some kind of dementia or flashbacks, which I won't elaborate on all of the interactions in this particular episode with this particular doctor that comes to visit the family, but it's still funny. But yeah, so this is kind of the whole scene that's set up for this episode. And I don't want to reveal a whole lot, but obviously, the train does appear, obviously, based on the actors and scenarios I provided. It's just the question of how it all pulls together. Now, without giving away the ending, I can take a step back and say that the first episode for Amazing Stories, this was awesome. This was a great start. And it sucked me right in as a young person when I first saw it. There's a comforting feel to projects that Steven Spielberg wrote and directed at this time. So it's a uniqueness that is both new and comforting with familiarity. And that's what I love it so much. I likened it to stage theater. Like when we attend a live stage performance, there's always this element of safety by attending within the audience. Yet we're engrossed in like whatever specific character or maybe a different scenario that's going on in that production. There's a personable touch to attending live productions. We feel more connected and drawn in without forgetting it's merely an act. So by nature, audiences are always clamor for like safeties within a play or a film, whatever production we're talking about. So, for example, we're sitting in the audience, you would say, which of these characters is likable, familiar, humorous, or comforting? So with Steven Spielberg, he creates numerous likable characters and even loathed villains, and sometimes a bit of both attributes are intertwined within a character. But there's always a safety to depend on within a Steven Spielberg film. Likable, charismatic, or even dynamic personalities. As with the stage, and this is the most important thing, at least for me, is that when you're watching a Steven Spielberg movie, I think he draws in the audience with a similar method. So he's pulling at our natural curiosities and instincts without washing away reality completely. There's always an edge of realness with a comforting draw. So the success of many films is dependent on the warm and sentimental abilities of actors themselves. And I never disregard this, but the success is always tied to the audience, the actors, and directors working in unison at the same time. So what does the audience want? What does the director want? What kind of vision do they want us to perceive? So therefore, many of Steven Spielberg's films resonate with their audiences in this way. The audience can comfortably watch from a distance, okay, safely, of how the story will progress with their safeties already chosen. And even if their chosen safeties are taken away, which I've been to a film, every one of us has been to a film like a horror movie where you're like, yep, that person's going to make it and that person doesn't. But all of a sudden, this other person you start to root for, your new safety net, you grab onto, even if they're the bad guy in those scenarios. We've all gone through that in a film where you kind of bounce around with people you start to like or dislike. You're like, oh, well, I can't depend on that character. He's out of control. Or that's not the right guy. He's actually a bad guy, right? But even if you have none of those character safeties, there remains something in a Steven Spielberg film, and it's an undeniable promise that the story will provide a sentimental lesson. So with this one episode among many, you always feel that promise. Ghost Train is a wonderful start to this series, and at the utmost a memorable story. And I hope that you will take a chance to watch it on NBC. Right now it's for free. You can stream it online for free. And I'm not plugging NBC. I don't get money from these people. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. You know what I mean? But it definitely is an episode that I highly recommend watching and taking the opportunity. It's available, so check it out, and I really hope everyone enjoyed my extremely long but hopefully informative video. Have a good afternoon and a good night wherever you are. Bye.
Mad squirrelly.